Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The fellas have been talking a lot of recruiting, a lot of summer scouting, kind of itching to talk about just a game matchup. And we're taking a look at potentially, in my mind, my favorite and the game I'm most excited for out of conference, Florida State, LSU, week one. You're looking at two teams that I think last year were bona fide top 10 teams, got better in the offseason, returned a lot of their talent from last year, and then are going to be matching up in what might be one of the more influential games we have in the whole entire 2023 season. Excited to get into some game previews. Now, before we do, again, just want to say thank you to you guys. The support, whether it's summer scouting, whether it's on the recruiting trail, transfer portal, you guys have been absolutely awesome. Over 6,000 subscribers on the channel. Can't thank you guys enough. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys. Dill, my mind, I've thought about this game for weeks. I can't wait for it to happen. I don't know who's going to win. We're going to break it down and talk about why LSU could win, why Florida State could win. But as it stands right now, my brain straight up in a pretzel with this game.
I mean, this is as exciting of a game as you can see in college football, especially in the cross-conference rivalry, or not rivalries, but cross-conference games.
Yeah.
But again, I know people complain about the Michigans and the Georgia putting like 3 cakewalk non-conference games on their schedule. And that's fair. And that's what makes these games so fun. Like, you respect these two programs doing it and giving people a good game in that week one slate. Because again, college football, I'll be excited for it week 0, but obviously like they don't give you the greatest games in the world that week. And then week 1 for Florida State and LSU to kind of put this matchup together and be willing to take that risk. Like, props to these two programs. This game's going to be electric.
It's going to be phenomenal. And part of the reason I have the box score up is, yes, these teams played 12 months ago, and a lot of the same players who played in that game are going to be playing again in 2023. That being said, how these programs are entering the 2023 season, it's going to look a lot different. And to start breaking down the game, I want to start with LSU because there's probably more change in terms of what this LSU team looks like now versus 12 months ago when they were playing this game. Bill, I want to start with just the general maturation process of Brian Kelly at LSU. It's like, looking back at that game, it's almost hard to believe Brian Kelly's this is only his second year. That was his first game coaching at LSU. And you saw just a lot of mistakes that LSU made in that game that you're not used to seeing Brian Kelly make. Brian Kelly coach team make. You had muff punts. You had holding penalties. It was a lot. And I think part of the reason getting into why LSU might win this game is because it's year 2. And I think this culture that Brian Kelly has cultivated is going to be a little bit stronger heading into 2023.
I mean, at the end of the day, what LSU is going to have is they were so young last year.
Yes.
And especially at the production. It's not to say their whole team was young, but their alpha dogs were really young. And a Mason Smith goes down immediately as a true sophomore. He's probably their best defensive lineman. Harold Perkins, I don't even think we really get to see play in that game. He's might be the best defensive player in all of college football. And then you look at the place that they probably matured the most, and that's up front. With those 2 tackles, that game, Jared Verse, like he took over and he dominated that, along with whole Florida State defensive line, frankly. But those 2 guys, now they look like they might be first round picks.
Yeah, that's probably where you start. And if you're optimistic about LSU winning this football game, I really do think it starts with this offensive line just getting better. In terms of, if you have just a bunch of returning starters who are 4th, 5th year guys, yeah, okay. The returning start, like Will Campbell and Emory Jones, like they made massive strides as the season went on. And that was probably the sore spot. Like, LSU really couldn't protect Jayden Daniels last year in terms of that Florida State pass rush just dogging LSU's offensive line. Will Campbell and company, I think, make some steps. I think you're going to see a much improved LSU offensive line, and that also gets into the run game. Florida State, top 5 defense against the pass last year, struggled a little bit against the run, and LSU, outside of Jayden Daniels, like going back, watching that game, you see Jayden Daniels' stat line, 16 carries for 114 yards. A lot of that was just him running for his life, being an athlete. In terms of running the football, I mean, averaging less than 3 yards per carry on designed runs. I think LSU might be able to run the football a little bit better against Florida State with an improved offensive line.
And that'll be the thing for LSU in general, is like their rushing attack improving. Because again, it did start really slow. And I know, like, we probably disagree on this. I think Logan Diggs is a big part of what they might be able to do differently. And it's a guy Brian Kelly obviously knows he's
Yep.
comfortable with in him coming in, because you never really got to see a guy emerge from that LSU group as being the guy, being the
Yep.
bell cow, being the guy who you give it to 20 times and let him go to work. I do wonder if Diggs can be that guy, just because, again, you just haven't seen anyone quite step up and take a stranglehold of that room.
Yeah, and it might be a running back by committee. I think the run game just started with the offensive line. Like, as that offensive line just drastically improved as the season went on, you saw the running game pick up as well. Now, another thing that's worth mentioning is, like, the players who played in that game in 2022, a lot of them are going to be playing in 2023, but LSU has a better feel of who their guys are, right? You thought Kayshon Boutte was kind of that guy. Going down to like Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and Jaray Jenkins, like, those are the guys for LSU. And then you even go back, Harold Perkins had 1 tackle for LSU. So I think that a lot of these guys who LSU just didn't know what they had because it's year one, they weren't really sure what their personnel was going to be. I think LSU has a cleaner picture in terms of who are the guys that we need to rely on to make plays and win football games with, as opposed to last year in 2022.
In that, I mean, Malik Neighbors is like the perfect encapsulation of that whole thing. He should have been getting fed the ball all year. He was clearly the best wide receiver on that team.
One of the best receivers in the country heading into
100%. And it's just, again, you mentioned Kayshon Boutte was the guy coming in. They did try to get him the football. It's Malik Neighbors a show, and I think he proved last year that he's very much ready for that number 1 guy and be their playmaker.
Yeah, and then, like, the last point, and we'll move on to Florida State, is Jayden Daniels just being the quarterback 1. I think he comes back, and he was a guy that got draft buzz, probably would have been a day 3 pick, super talented coming out of high school. Everyone knows how talented and the ceiling Jayden Daniels had. I mean, this time last year, it was a full-on quarterback battle with multiple quarterbacks in that room. And so Jayden Daniels, as a transfer, not getting a ton of quarterback 1 reps in fall camp, thrusted into a situation where the offensive line was poor. Kayshon Boutte played straight up bad in that game, bunch of drops, dogging plays. I think you're going to see a massive step in terms of Jayden Daniels' play, and you're going to see the Jayden Daniels that was playing at the end of the year as opposed to what Jayden Daniels looked like early 2022.
In that, I mean, he's a guy who I think that did take way too much heat early, and now people.
Agreed. And I hand up, I was way too critical of him.
Oh, same. I was like, oh, he can't sit in the pocket. He can't do this. He doesn't look for his guys. It's like, well, in fairness, that game was just chaos. But you saw him get to that Alabama game, get to some of those games later in the year. He was throwing. They was throwing for a lot of yards in the air. He was still running. That's still a part of his game. It's not to say he shouldn't use it, but he was playing just really good quarterback. And again, I think everyone kind of came into the season wanting to hate everything LSU, because people who don't like Brian Kelly really don't like him. So I feel like they did carry some stink all year. It's like, oh, yes, it's LSU, Brian Kelly. Let's hate on him. Let's get after him. But I mean, this team is really, really good. I think they're going to be a huge problem all year.
100%. And the offense is going to look much better. And the defense, they did a phenomenal job. Like, you have Harold Perkins. Now, Harold Perkins is going to be the guy on that defense. You have Mason Smith back healthy. Ali Gay, I think, was the one who just got kicked off for a ridiculous clearly targeting, stupid play. Ali Gay just wasn't that good last year for LSU. You bring in a bunch of guys that you're excited for on the edge. You have Omar Spates at that middle linebacker spot, Denver Harris at the cornerback spot. Like, this team got better on defense as well. And you could say that for both teams, right? We just talked a bunch about LSU and why they could win. You could say a lot of the same things about this Florida State team. And what I want to start with Florida State is a very similar conversation we had with LSU's. Florida State now has a better feel of who their guys are in terms of who are we going to go win this football game. Last year, like, Trayshawn Ward, as good as he was, I'm a Trayshawn Ward guy, former walk-on. Trey Benson is that running back, and they didn't know. He's 6 carries for 15 yards. He averaged 2.5 yards per carry. It's going to be a better offensive line group, but Florida State knows who that running back is in the backfield, and you could say a lot of the same things for how they know who the receivers are as well.
Well, and not to mention just the addition of probably the best transfer portal wideout in college football in Keon Coleman. I mean, I think, again, he didn't put up massive stats at Michigan State because that team was really poor, especially on offense. but he's awesome.
Trust us as Michigan fans, we know Keon.
I know enough about how much Keon Coleman can take a football game over, and just again, you look, LSU secondary did get better for sure, but it was certainly a weak point of what they had last year. And again, you have a lot of unknowns. Like you brought some big time transfers in, but maybe not have played a ton of Power 5 football yet. Again, Denver Harris, super talented, but we still need to see it on the field. Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson are going to be huge problems, I think. Winston Wright can really play. The skill positions at Florida State, I think, have taken a major step up.
Yeah, and like just looking back at last year, like Ontario Wilson, Pookie Wilson was the leading receiver heading into this year. Like, Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, those are your guys. Jaheim Bell's your guy, and Trey Benson's your guy. Like, I just don't think Florida State really knew who their guys were on the offense side of the ball. Now they do, and I think that's going to be a massive storyline. You mentioned Winston Wright, and you could even throw in Hakeem Williams. Winston Wright, I've talked with a few Florida State fans in the comment section. Man, if he puts it together, I was watching some Winston Wright back at West Virginia. Adds a different element to that wide receiver room. Like you have Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, two guys who are towers, who are jump ball machines, big bodies, hard to deal with. Winston Wright in space is different. And if he can get back to that form, I think he's that wide receiver 3, and then you add a utility guy who I think is a perfect fit in Jaheim Bell, you have a good sense of who these guys are. Who are your playmakers on the offense side of the ball for Jordan Travis to go to, where in 2022 you just didn't. And Dylan, another story that, Florida State dominated this game up front on the defensive line. I think this defensive line group is better heading into 2023. And you look at this matchup, that's probably where this game gets decided. This LSU improved offensive line versus a very improved Florida State defensive line.
Now, I will say there also could be a part of us like, okay, we're saying LSU's offensive line got way, way better. Certainly that's part of it. But at Florida State, like that defensive line was as good as anyone in the country last year, especially when Jared Verse was healthy. When he was good to go, which it felt like it wasn't always the case in parts of the season, he was as dominant of a defensive lineman as there was. And now you got Peyton coming up, who, again, looks like he might be really something.
He's going to be good.
As much as we say this LSU line improved, there could be an element like, well, they didn't see a defensive line like Florida State, besides maybe Alabama, on the rest of their season.
The Florida State defensive line, there's a good argument. It's one of the best in the country. And just to list off, like Jared Verse, probably the best edge rusher in the country. Patrick Payton, a guy that, from what I'm hearing out of Florida State and what you saw at the end of the season, like he's a dude. And then you bring in some transfers. Braden Fisk, you have Fabian Lovett on the inside. Those are two, one of the better duos on the interior. And then Gilbert Edmond you could throw in there. It's a group that vastly, vastly improved. And I think the last thing to talk about in terms of Florida State winning this football game is it just seems like Mike Norvell and this Florida State program are a little bit further on in their maturity process as a program, right? BK is going into his second year at LSU. Mike Norvell has established this culture. He's established the guys. You have the lead, the no-brainer leaders in this locker room. And a lot of those guys, Jared Verse, Jordan Travis, Johnny Wilson, would be in NFL camps right now had they wanted to go to the draft. They come back to win games like this. I think that's like that last – and I think you saw it last year as well, like Mike Norvell and Florida State just being a little bit more ahead in terms of winning those close games in the maturity process of the program. I still think that's the case heading into 2023.
And let's not forget, they still have Jordan Travis. I think he will be the best quarterback in this matchup, personally.
Ooh.
I could argue it close for sure. But Jordan Travis is, to me, I think he's one of the, a winner. He just,
he is.
When things were going bad at Florida State, it always felt like when he came in and took the ball, things turned around to an extent. And the big thing now is he's, in addition to having that dog in him, if you will, I don't want to throw that cliche too much, but that's kind of what I think about his whole game.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of skill behind that too, where you saw last year the throwing from that time he took over in 2019 or 20. I don't remember what year it is. He's been there for so long.
I know where you're going with this, and I've been banging the table for it.
He's so much better now.
Jordan Travis, the jumps in his game from year to year have been nuts if you look at the numbers. Better completion percentage, more average yards per pass. Everything about Jordan Travis from a pocket passer standpoint has gotten better. If you get another jump from Jordan Travis, print the shirts. This dude is a bona fide Heisman contender. And that's what's most optimistic is a lot of times when you're talking about a 6-year guy, It's, okay, how much better is he going to get? Jordan Travis has shown that he is still getting better. Even going into his 5th year, he got better. That was the best Jordan Travis we've seen throughout his whole career. If you get an even better Jordan Travis in 2023, which I think you certainly could when you add in all the wide receivers that he has to work with, a run game with Trey Benson.
And an offensive line that's retooled in the portal, and that's get better.
That offensive line, I think that's going to help Florida State in like the whole season because that depth just wasn't there. Like Florida State's starting offensive line wasn't bad, but when you saw that team get banged up last year, like that's when they lost their 3 games, like when they just weren't healthy. And Jordan Travis, I don't think was exactly healthy all year either. Both these teams, that's what makes this game so special is both these teams were legitimately some of the best teams you saw in the country.
They're right on the cusp. It's like the 2 bluest of the blue bloods in the country. It's like they're kind of getting back to where the fans expect and where the programs belong. It
seems like it's both their years. Like when you look across the country, Georgia replacing a quarterback. I'm not saying Georgia's going to be bad. Alabama replacing a quarterback. Ohio State replacing a quarterback. There does seem to be an opening in terms of a national champion, right? It might not be. This is probably the least the least confident you are in with an Alabama team, the least confident you are in with an Ohio State team. And Georgia obviously is going to still be good. I think most people are still pretty confident with that. But still, like there's an opening in terms of one of these teams, Florida State, LSU, you could throw in Michigan there, stepping up and winning a national championship this year. That's what makes this game so special. Can't wait for it. And I don't even know what my pick's going to be. We'll preview this game again in August as it gets closer, but it's got my brain in a pretzel. Would like to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section, of course, and appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys. A lot more game previews to come. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.